For more than 100 years, oil was everything. It was the lifeblood of nations, the one resource that really defined global power, and, let's be honest, sparked a lot of conflict. But today, a new resource is taking its place. And it's not black gold, it's silicon. We're talking about semiconductors and the critical raw materials you need to make them. They are, without a doubt, the new oil of the 21st century. So, let's dive into this indispensable and, frankly, often invisible foundation of our entire modern world. You know, deep inside every single piece of technology that we rely on, from the smartphone in your hand to the servers that run the internet, and even the guidance systems in the most advanced jet fighters, there's a tiny, incredibly complex slice of silicon. And a new great power competition is heating up, not for control over oil fields, but for the mines, the refineries, and the factories that create these technological marvels. So, how did we get here? And maybe more importantly, where is all this headed? We're going to break it all down in 5 parts. First, we'll look at the fragile foundation of this global supply chain. Then, the huge shift from efficiency to security. We'll dive into the geopolitical crucible where this whole competition is playing out. Pinpoint the high-risk flashpoints that threaten all of us. And finally, explore the global race to build a more resilient future. All right, first up, let's unpack the very foundation of our digital world. It's a global balancing act, so specialized that a single disruption can ripple across the entire globe almost instantly. At the very heart of this are 2 key things. First, you've got critical raw materials, or CRMs. Think cobalt, rare earth elements, gallium, germanium. These are the absolute essential building blocks. And second, semiconductors, or chips, which are basically the brains of all modern electronics. The thing is, without a steady supply of both, the entire digital economy, and even our big push for green energy, it just grinds to a halt. And this is where the incredible hyper-specialization of the supply chain becomes so clear. It's like a global relay race, and no single country can run the whole thing. The most advanced chip designs, that's dominated by the United States. The unbelievably complex machines you need to physically make those chips, they come from the Netherlands. The raw materials themselves are mostly mined and processed in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo and, crucially, China. And then the final step, the actual fabrication, turning all that into advanced chips. That happens almost entirely in Taiwan. Every single one of those handoffs is a potential choke point. Now, this extreme fragility has kicked off a monumental shift in how the world thinks. For decades, the goal was simple: make things as cheaply and efficiently as possible. But, well, that era is over. Now, a new priority has taken its place: securing the supply chain, no matter the cost. This really is a fundamental change in mindset. The old way was all about globalization and just-in-time delivery. If a factory somewhere else could make a part for a few cents less, production moved there. Simple. The new paradigm, though, driven by rising geopolitical tension and the very painful lessons we all learned during the pandemic, is all about resilience. It's a move away from pure economic logic to geostrategic necessity. Securing your supply from partners you trust is now way more important than just getting the lowest price. And this isn't just some corporate strategy. It's a full-blown national security imperative. As this quote makes clear, governments around the world don't see these dependencies as a simple feature of global trade anymore. No, they see them as a critical vulnerability. The idea that a geopolitical rival could hold your economy and even your national defense hostage by controlling a key part of the supply chain, that has gone from a theoretical risk to a very clear and present danger. So this brings us right to the central conflict. This isn't just about economics anymore. It's about power. A geopolitical struggle is underway to control the critical nodes, the choke points, in this entire global network. You can really see the strategic standoff right here. On one side, you have the United States and its allies. They dominate the high-end, knowledge-intensive parts of the chain. The US controls something like 85% of the design tools for advanced chips. The Netherlands has a monopoly on the equipment, and Taiwan and South Korea are the only places that can mass produce the really good stuff. But on the other side, China dominates the foundational level, the raw materials. It processes about 70% of the world's rare earths, and through its companies controls 15 of the 17 biggest cobalt mines in the DRC. It's this really fragile balance of mutual dependence and strategic leverage. And right here, this is the West's Achilles heel. I mean, it's one thing to dig raw materials out of the ground, but turning them into the ultra-pure elements you need for high-tech manufacturing, that's a whole other story. China built this dominance over decades with massive state subsidies, lower labor costs, and frankly, a willingness to ignore the environmental impact of processing. They effectively priced the rest of the world out of the market, and that gives Beijing immense potential leverage over the entire global supply. This isn't some new strategy. As this incredibly prescient quote from Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping shows, Beijing has understood the strategic value of these resources for decades. Just like oil defined geopolitics in the 20th century, China has been positioning itself to have a commanding role in the essential materials of the 21st. 100%. What in the world does that number represent? Well, it's the Dutch company ASML's complete and total monopoly on what are called extreme ultraviolet or EUV lithography machines. These are the only machines on Earth capable of making the world's most advanced semiconductors. And despite billions and billions in investment from competitors, no one has been able to replicate this technology. That gives the Netherlands, and by extension its allies, an absolutely irreplaceable choke point in the production of all cutting-edge tech. Okay, so we have this tense balance of power, and what that does is create specific, very high-stakes flashpoints, scenarios that could instantly disrupt the global economy and push the world right to the brink. In the entire global technology ecosystem, there is no single point of failure more critical than this one, the island of Taiwan. It's been described as sitting just 110 miles of water away from the United States' main strategic competitor, which sees the island as a breakaway province. And this number is exactly why that island is so critical. 92%. Just think about that. That's the share of the world's most advanced semiconductors manufactured by Taiwan's flagship company, TSMC. We're talking about the chips under 10 nanometers that power our most advanced AI, our data centers, and our military systems. A disruption to this one single island would have an immediate, and I mean catastrophic, global impact. So when experts were surveyed on the biggest threats to the supply chain, a military conflict over Taiwan ranked as the highest impact event. And what's even more chilling is that they believe there's a greater than 50% chance of it happening in the next decade. The other top threats? An embargo on raw materials by China, and severe shortages as the green energy transition competes for the exact same scarce materials. Now, a full-scale invasion would be incredibly costly and risky, but many analysts think a naval blockade is a much more likely scenario. See, Taiwan is heavily reliant on imports for both food and energy. So the strategic logic is that a blockade could starve the island into submission, forcing it to capitulate, and allowing Beijing to take control of the world's most valuable factories, maybe without a major military confrontation at all. Faced with these severe, potentially existential risks, nations and companies are scrambling to react. So how is the world trying to de-risk these fragile supply chains and forge some new paths to resilience? Well, the response from the US and its allies is a pretty comprehensive three-pronged strategy. First, they're investing. We're talking tens of billions of dollars being poured into reshoring and friendshoring chip manufacturing through massive public initiatives like the Chip Socks in both the US and Europe. Second, they're trying to diversify. They are actively working to develop alternative sources for critical raw materials in friendly nations like Australia and Canada to cut that reliance on China. And third, they're building alliances, strengthening technology partnerships like the one between the US, Japan, and South Korea to coordinate on everything from missile defense to supply chain early warning systems. It's really important to understand, though, that complete self-sufficiency is a myth. It's just not going to happen. The supply chain is simply too complex for any single country, even the United States, to master every single step. The only viable path to resilience is through cooperation. It has to be a multilateral approach, strengthening partnerships between trusted allies to create a whole network of secure and redundant supply chains. And this all brings us to the final lingering question. We are really at a hinge point in history. Can all these massive investments and new alliances actually succeed in de-risking our technological foundation and building a more stable future? Or are we just heading for a permanent split? A fractured techno-economic world with two competing, totally incompatible systems. The race for control of the new oil is on, and the outcome is going to define the 21st century.